Hi there, everybody. My name is Kate, and welcome to my channel, Firehorse Academy 88. Thank you for joining me. Wow. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is what most readers or intuitives, or a lot anyway, that I have listened to and studied a little bit of, would say that during a Mercury retrograde right now would be the awful time to make contracts, make major changes, blah, 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 blah. And I'm here to tell you that this year may be the very year to shake it up and going ahead and use Mercury retrograde to bust that myth, if you're ready to do so. Because I find for myself anyway that the bolder I am during periods of my doubt, and I don't mean bold stupid, I mean bold, well, strategized and then put it out there, that I make the best decision at the furthest point of my, ability to cope with my fear without going over the edge and then panicking constantly. That's how I've grown my fear from being fear to more trusting and more able to use periods like Mercury retrograde, especially during the season of Sirius Stargate going into the Lion's Gate. This is a powerful time of year, and we're in the Fire Horse year. So I personally am one that's kind of a divine disruptor. I like to shake shit up, and I don't like for people to tell me that, well, that really shouldn't be done during that time. And my first question is going to answer with, why, what would be the answer for why? It's a paradigm that would tell me that I would need to not make a contract during Mercury retrograde. And I am doing both things. I'm breaking a contract, closing out a major significant bullshit cycle and contract, and then as well starting a brand new lifestyle. So all things can be happening at one time because they are. And so when we take things as gospel truth, that I didn't honestly even remember that Mercury retrograde was happening. There's a Kazemi on the 12th, by the way, if that's significant to you. Today is, I don't know, 10th or 11th or something. So if that's significant, hop on that. But when we lock down and we're telling one another that, oh, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, that always just has rubbed me the wrong way, because the way that I grow my strength is to bust through the paradigm, burst through, if I'm going to be completely, technically correct in my grammar, to burst through those doorways and say, I'm here, when we can, and at whatever level of that we can, to break the myth. Because the one that has to be convinced is not the outside world, it's the inside world. We are the creators and the manifestors of what we have out here. The difference, though, with trying to understand ourselves as an interface with the rest of the world is that there are many people that are locked in some severe contracts that they are coming due right now. A lot of karmic stuff that's coming down and breaking down. And Mercury retrograde means a whole lot of stuff. It means a release for a lot of us high sensitives that have been living in the dark of what for a long time. It means the closing down of a lot of very dark and nasty cycles, where that side is going to now take the burden through 13 rather than ask the light to carry it, the dark, and transmute it. It's being severed, and the wheat and the chaff are simply moving into separate stations from one another. The polarity has gotten so extreme that there's very little bandwidth between them, and you may find yourself in conversation with people and just going, what are they saying to me? And if we can hold our own in those situations and know that despite whatever somebody might tell me is a really great time to do something or not a great time, when I know inside of me that I'm going to move forward regardless of what anybody says to me, then once I've come to that solid conviction, it really doesn't matter what anybody has to say or do. And over the last few weeks, the last few months really have been closing in on contracts that, for me personally, I could see things were winding down. I had no idea how they were going to go to Clowntown first. And if you look and see my previous video, I lost everything in a sudden hospitalization. My seizure disorder went into some great disorder that I couldn't manage anymore. And suddenly I was swept out of having 2 cats and a dog, which devastates me still. I don't, wake up every day to an empty apartment and go, wow, it's empty and I don't see any fur balls anywhere, and this means nothing to me. However, part of what I do to keep breaking through paradigms and bullshit and contracts that people want to keep hanging on my head and keep me sticking around to help them pay the bill of what they said or what they did, the way that I help myself through that is to make bold statements and then follow through with bold action, whatever it is. And to say that, that's unfair, Kate, because you already know, if you saw me 10 years ago, I was weighing closer to 300 pounds and drooled and was on about 12 or 13 medications for my mental health, none of which was true. I am not obese by nature, obviously, because once I started getting honest about what was around me, the world crashed instantly within, months and maybe even a year. Within a year, 2018 and going into 2019, my world dramatically crashed, and here I am, that I've had yet another collapse, it seems, and it was seems almost as severe as it was 8 years ago. However, an 8-year cycle for an 8-year girl, I run on a lot of numbers and different reasons why I do so that have very little to do with numerology. Perhaps they mean something significant to me. And so when I'm looking at my own life and only using the outside world as a reference point rather than a projection point, or to receive projections from somebody else that I'm going to twist around the axle and wonder what they meant by that, most of the time I walk out in the world and I don't care. It can't matter to me, because I need to stay completely consistently plugged into me and what I have to say as the co-creator of my reality. Otherwise, I'm handing it away out here in a suggestion that somebody else has tapped my fear or my anger or my whatever. And if that is true, that I'm feeling that, then I do need to respect that and give that the credence of, okay, what is this that's twitching me sideways? And why do I feel angry? Why do I feel sad? Why do I feel triggered by this person or this situation? Because right now you have high-level energy workers, high sensitives, etc., that are seeing things clearly, and there's no problem whatsoever. They're seeing everything as it is for them, and they're able to move and navigate. You've got some other people getting caught up in projections. You've got other people caught up in mirroring, and those are all very different experiences. And depending on who you would listen to, well, that's clearly a projection. When you're doing a mass, collective reading, or you're doing, something that is going to involve everybody, then we need to include the spectrum of what could be everybody's experience. And then, really teaching, I feel like, more honestly, to say, how does this apply to you specifically, based on your own archetypal design, based on your own blueprint design? What does it say to you? What is your meaning to that? Not what is my meaning that I told you that it means for you. For instance, I had out my window yesterday, I had a young male deer. Now, on this hillside right in front of me, I live in the foothills of Colorado Springs, and the Rocky Mountains, or Pikes Peak, Tahoe, is right here outside my window. And I had a young male deer that just captured me. I saw it, and I thought I saw the little earbuds and stuff, and I thought, really? How cool is that? And I grabbed my little thingy, my sparring glass, that I took a look at him, and it was amazing to watch him. He was just doing his own thing, and I asked him. I didn't go look it up in the symbolism book. I didn't do anything, because I've never seen a male deer here except for once, and it was a big old fella, and it was last fall when I moved in, and he had business. He was in the rut season, and he was headed somewhere, or looked like he had a long night, needed to go lie down somewhere. But when I saw this little young guy, he was maybe a couple years old, but he was by himself, and he looked pretty confident, and I asked him, just in spirit, why can we not ask him? Why would we need to look that up in a book, or why would we need to look up the symbolism? I asked him, what are you meaning to me? Because what I see is a young guy that looks pretty strong and healthy, and you'd be nibbling on that bush and looking mighty fine, and you represent strength and resilience to me. What else do you have to say to me? And I sat and watched him, and he just showed to me this beautiful display that he very gracefully carried himself as a young nubile male. He wasn't yet ready, obviously, just in size alone and stature alone. He isn't yet ready to take on the responsibility of being the old guy, because he's not an OG yet. He's the version of what will be an OG in the future version of he. And yet he has training within him, deep within his own DNA. He already understands how to be an old guy. He already understands how to be the grown-up. He already understands how to be the most mature version of deer, male deer, stag, that he can be here on this planet. That is encoded deep within him, much like, the tree, the little, acorn or whatever it is that grows the tree, that the seed contains every bit of information, every bit of the blueprint information. And so for him, he's already got that deep within him, and he doesn't really need to do much to answer the call, because the natural world answers its own call far more naturally. Now, he's got, me staring at him from a building, which is quite unnatural. However, it's become natural enough in his environment that he felt comfortable to show himself out, well enough for me to see. And so whenever we're interfacing with nature, nature is able to show us a clearer representation of what that DNA blueprint activation is, that he already knows what it is, and yet he's very gracefully testing the ground. I'm sure somebody's got an eye on him or would notice. I don't really know what male deer honestly do at his age. I've never actually thought about looking it up, that part of it, to know what their habits are. However, I feel pretty certain that an uncle or a brother or a dad or something, a mom, somebody would be wondering where he was if he did not arrive back to the herd at some point. And yet he needs time, to go out and explore his world and find out, where's my divine? How do I answer this? And as I was watching him, the velvet is just so young and beautiful, and he was so graceful, and he would just, very gently, almost as gently as the female deer. It was amazing. He was very gently nibbling on the bush, and then he'd pull back just a little bit and get what he needed, and he pulled up one of his legs, and it was almost like he was dancing right there in front of me, very gracefully, this Baryshnikov. It was really cool. And as I watched that, I thought, well, what's the difference between what human beings are doing and what nature is doing? And what the difference is that nature has not been nearly as polluted, and their DNA not nearly 1144 as denuded as the human beings. The human being has had their DNA split out. We've had our minds split out. We have fractals of, pieces of us. We have people with very dark attachments. We have people in dark arts that are just, crumbling and falling down. Towers are crashing. And the natural world responds to all of it with the same that it does a wildfire, or an earthquake, or whatever natural disasters. So for them, 1212, they're not experiencing the world. And there goes a blue jay. I never see those. Actually, yeah, that's a Stellar's jay. That's a very specific type of bluebird there, blue jay type bird. Anyway, when we see anomalies like that, notice them and say thank you for them, right? That's a good thing to do. But the natural world will respond to crisis the way that it understands. And it doesn't understand a war. It doesn't understand this or that. Nature runs on her own time. Earth is on her own time, and she answers to divine the way that she sees fit. She has her own consciousness, and she deals with her stuff. A tsunami, a flood, a hurricane, whatever. That is where the disaster part of the natural world comes. And then all of the animals and all of the creatures, the trees, etc., respond accordingly. They do not answer the call of fear and oh my gosh and karmic balance and oh no. And they don't get caught in the reincarnation loop. They don't get caught in the dark magic, the black arts, and all these crazy things. They don't get whipped up into that. Certain animals do. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as a collective whole, the entire body of the natural world does not respond the same way that the human being does as an individual, all the way into the collectives of people, into the collective consciousness of planet Earth, which is cracking wide open with, do you wish to have rebirth, or do you wish to stay down here and continue to pile down into whatever that is that drives the fear and keeps the darkness going? And the difference for the human is that depending on how much we want to get invested in observing the natural world, perhaps, or observing ourselves, or questioning, being deeply introspective, and get out of closets where we're going to, get really solid with it. This means this, and this means this, and I have to have that. Those are anxieties we place upon ourselves unnecessarily, and anywhere that we can unclench that will allow us to start a cascade of information. The soul at the basic nugget is sovereign. It cares to be sovereign. Now, many souls in this planet are trapped deep in the karmic loop and the reincarnation garbage, and there's a lot of, that veil area, that's just nothing but, frequencies and all kinds of, like looking at a bandwidth of just chaos and seeing, a lot. And so what I like to visualize whenever I'm seeing that kind of stuff, and the way that I like to put that into perspective for me, is that when I'm hearing a lot of static or I'm not getting a lot of clear communication, that's some bullshit. Because my very first thing that I want to do when I wake up in the morning, especially during Mercury retrograde or any other day, is to wake up in the morning and be deeply aware of how I actually feel. And again, 10 years ago, not so much. However, it came rather quickly to finally turn my attention onto me in the right way, because answering my fear and my anxiety about, oh no, what's the day going to be, did not really serve me. It answered me better to ask not what's wrong with me, what do I feel about what I see? What's the mismatch in me? Because apparently there's something causing me to feel a lot of anxiety. Now, that was my personal story, is that I felt constantly afraid. I had an addiction to sleeping a lot based on a little pill I took, because I personally just couldn't cope. I have a neurodivergency and my nervous system couldn't cope, and it didn't. I didn't even try. And I had ballooned up to 300 pounds over 3 decades, and it was awful. However, the very moment that it clicked into place for me that, let me just hit the toggle over here. Maybe it's me and it's okay. However, maybe it's because what's out there is not okay. And I started relying more on the fact that I have really observed the world very differently for as long as I can remember, since I was born, because I've been neurodivergent since I was born, and I've always considered myself an observer from the outside. And I don't think that makes me necessarily better at doing earth operations. It just makes me way more super detached from, hope that's not making noise, from what people are doing, because I was detached already. Most of the time, most people never understood me. I damn sure did not understand. However, I could see inconsistency. I could see all of the, what is that? And the issue is, though, not the inability to see, it's the gaslighting that came to me. And I think for a lot of other people too, I think for most people, that when we're taught how to really regulate what we're seeing based on how we're feeling, we would notice that there's a whole lot of lying stuff going on around us. There's a whole lot of inconsistency. There's a whole lot of lying within us. There's a whole lot of things that are out of balance and do not make any sense whatsoever. And so trying to attack things from, I'll just lose weight, that's why I was never successful, or I'll just stop doing this, or I'll just do that. This is not a just do one thing. It is a full body, full life integration that begins with the first choice of, this is what I choose to do. And when we narrow it down in one place, one way, and one method, in my particular opinion, I found that way too limiting, because I want to be more like the hummingbird. A hummingbird has way more flexibility and can zip around. Dragonfly too has way more flexibility, and despite the fact that most of the time they don't ever stop, they do in fact stop long enough on branches to rest. They do. So even though they're going at the zzz constantly, they do stop occasionally. And when we see them, they're flitting around and doing these helicopter moves, and they do have sustained flight. So they have the ability to be able to move very flexibly, and they move from flower to flower to flower to flower, and they're helping to pollinate thousands of trees in the process, flowers in the process, and be getting the nectar from hundreds of different trees. Pardon me, I'm all about those trees, from hundreds of different flowers that maybe they don't want to sample just the one, must not be, they're not made for that. And so some people are just not made, they're not meant to suck from one sapling, finally get my tree in there. We're not meant, not everybody, and especially if we're high sensitives, empaths, light workers, really high level, sensitivity, where the world hurts sometimes. The world used to hurt me a whole lot. It used to hurt me to go out and have to see that stuff, and that's why I took a million medications to try to dumb that down, and went into Clown Town with being crazy. I don't have a mental health issue. What I had was it hurts to be me with you and 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 you. And in the situation that I was personally in, it hurt a lot to be in the environment that I was in. And because I also simultaneously was not connecting with nature, nothing was making sense. I couldn't find comfort anywhere except that as a child, I found comfort just in being alone and taking care of myself. I sucked my thumb, I held my animal, and that was what I did to cope with my world. And I dissociated a lot, so dissociation isn't quite helpful. However, it did give me the opportunity to learn how to use my coping tools as an adult. Going through a major life change 8 years ago when I got divorced, I got left at the curb by everybody I knew, and then those people wanted to play with me, and I decided, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to leave this on the curb and leave all of you instead, and became an independent person. And for the first time, in my life, I was really feeling the independence and the ability to move without any fear of what anybody's thoughts were, because I had, in loyalty, stuck around for years, decades, my whole life out of a loyalty, not out of my inability to see. And once it finally toggled over of maybe this is a you thing and not a me, maybe I can see just fine. What a bold statement to make to myself in the quiet of my own heart, deep in my bed, buried down somewhere, probably the very first time. However, where in the world would it go that we would not ask that question? However, no one in my world wanted me to ask that question, because as long as I was serving the system as a donkey to the system, then I can continue to be, doing favors and doing this and showing up and blah, 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 blah. Instead of answering the call of my sovereignty is not going to want me to be 300 pounds on 13 meds and drooling and falling down and peeing my pants. That's not going to work for me. No matter how old I am, I'm going to need to answer the call, because I just can't stand this anymore. And it came as a flash. The very moment that I started asking those questions, it came in the flash in a conversation with someone where I saw the eyes shift and I went, okay, got it. And I was gone, and okay, that's the end. That relationship is over. Got it clear. And it took about 2 years for me to finish, working my way through how many times I was going to play. However, during every one of those successions of layer after layer after layer of saying, no, not going to go with me. You're going to keep expecting me to put up with this, and to put up with the reactive abuse, and to put up with, whatever this is that is being baited for me to do. I don't choose to do that. I don't choose to do that. And it all began with the question of, what if it's them and not me? What if we are being told, some bullshit story that serves the other side? Because clearly wheat and chaff are very much in disagreement with one another about who's going to win this thing. And that's something I've never understood, is that I'm not here to win anything, because I never, 22, I never wanted to be in competition with anybody to begin with. And I think that's pretty true for a lot of neurodivergent people, a lot of high sensitives, a lot of light workers. There are a lot of people that we're not looking to be in competition. We're here to help, and we know that. And once we know that our mission is not to, how may I serve you specifically while you suck me dry, no. Jesus talked about how may I serve. And he didn't say, go into the temple and start your flea market, and how may I serve that? How may I serve my bingo game in the church? Or how may I serve my vampiric suckling off of this child? Or how may I sacrifice, whatever I'm sacrificing over there? How may I do that? Because that isn't what's actually serving. And so when I think about Jesus and how may I serve, how may I serve the greater good of what is good? Not everything that's happening is good in the hood, as you can see. And so trying to work through some idea that I'm here to serve everybody. Jesus didn't serve everybody. He told, as a matter of fact, that you cannot. You pass by the people that are still sitting on their mat, that they don't want to take it up and bring it with them, then you keep it pushing. And if the fellow isn't ready, then bury your dead. You got work to do, then bury your dead. Why are we talking here, bro? You coming or you not? Because me waiting for you to guarantee that, your dad's death will end in your reward and then you're coming, I don't need your shekel, man. You got other stuff to do. And he left people like that doing whatever it was that they did. He also told the demon stuff, the attachments, the dark things that were on people and running them hard. Yeah, hop into that pig and off the cliff you go. And he didn't ask a lot of questions. He wasn't interviewing people. He wasn't testing their spirit and all that crap because he didn't need to. He understood what he was doing. He understood he had his disciples. He understood he had 12 million people behind him, or he had him. He understood his journey. It's the journey, in my humble opinion, that is everyone's, because it's the one that he shared. And he was by far not the only one. However, the cleanest version that works for me because it's most universally understood. What he said is, venture forward and do what you got to do and deal with the Judases, deal with the this, and walk your road and get spit on, etc. Didn't say get spit on unnecessarily, get spit on in the house that you're serving Thanksgiving dinner and people are abusing you. He didn't say that. That's not the journey, carrying the cross. That's just a codependent and abusive relationship that will suck you dry and leave you empty at the end of it. End of every Christmas, end of every Thanksgiving, leaves us empty. So when we finally have that ego death, that is what Jesus' walk was representative to me and to many people. However, again, I'm not speaking for others, I'm speaking for me, that Jesus was indeed a real man. I do believe that. However, he was representing the manifestation of how we can transcend the ego, because he was known to come in form after he transcended, after he died on the cross and he rose. He ascended from the egoic position into a balanced divine masculine and divine feminine. And so he was able to be seen by people, by certain people, by those who could no longer perceive him. That's like chaff, trying to grab him and say, hey, I've been bleeding for 12 years and, just the hope of even being able to touch you. That person may have had enough faith by then to actually still perceive him. However, Judas, he already didn't perceive him hardcore the last time. Then he's, nowhere in the field of vision where Judas would be available to even know where he was. And so we're walking amongst one another and kind of not really seeing, and we are seeing, and sometimes we're not really necessarily understanding out of that discerning issue what it is that we are seeing based on the gaslighting and the bullshit, because people around us that can sense us rising and moving out of that ego position, they will absolutely lose their mind if they're super attached to the design that they've helped build of, we need you to stay locked right here in this mode because we only go this many different directions. And if you start going up, we like being here in our codependent behavior, in our dark choices. And in some of our cases, we have some very nasty, stalkery, nasty types that like to get janky and weird and very, very dark closets doing some very dark things. And then we get stuck in our fear with, oh no. And so during a time when transcending the ego is really, there's not really much left to do on the to-do list. There's no reincarnation, bopping around picking up stuff off the planet. I must visit here and check off this part of my soul. I don't believe that. That's not what Jesus taught. And it's also not a good thought to believe that we must do something before, if and then when, like, oh no, hold on a second. That the closest thing I can do is answer every day of how may I serve my life to be showing up in the most awareness that I can to bring forth the healthiest divine feminine and the healthiest divine masculine in the higher mind, the higher cup, being sharp and severe with my boundaries and a big F no, when I know to, and very kind and loving, etc. It would depend on who's perceiving me and why they're perceiving me in whatever way that they are. However, transcending ego on earth right now, standing in a position where we're even willing to do that doesn't mean that we won't run into the buttholes. It won't mean that we, aren't going to be surrounded by them sometimes, because it's our work to help clear some of that density out of the field so that there will be other people, especially if we're forward leaders we're going to need to stand in that density for a little bit longer without getting hung up in it and without questioning, what am I doing wrong? You know, that's one of the best things with that toggle is it's not a me thing being wrong. It's a me thing needing to look around and see, how is this really affecting me, and what is wrong with the situation in general, not what's wrong with me or what's wrong with them. What's wrong with the imbalance? What is it that feels off kilter to me? And that makes it easier to begin to understand when my body is the barometer. It already is. I'm a neurosensitive, so I'm going to really need to answer that call. And as an empath, you know, people that are empaths and seers and stuff, we answer the call of, how do I feel when I enter this room? And if I feel funny, then I want to know why. What is it? What's my baseline? And until I really get those questions answered, then I'm answering the call of what will get me to where I can deal with how I feel when I enter any room, instead of knowing that this is my baseline, this is how I feel. Then as my body is my awareness and I'm checking things out and feeling the sensations in my body, we can activate a lot more gifts and a lot more awareness if we're asking the questions of, how do I feel this in my body, and what does that bring up for me? What does that, you know, assume for me? What can I learn from the deer about grace and beauty? I was having a moment of just kind of like, this is bizarre, because a lot of stuff's changing in my world rapidly yet again. And it's okay. However, he stopped me dead with, yeah, there's a need for a masculine, softer version of deer. However, he was very clear for me that I'm showing you the grace and agility that I got my left hoof up here by my right eyeball somewhere, you know, and I'm showing the nibbling the food and just casually walking around dead heat in the middle of the day, you know. And Colorado, most of the county below me is just smoke riddled and is having fire issues and all kinds of stuff. The heat is intense. You know, this is not, Tavo is not the mountain to be messing with. It's not that Tavo is angry. This is a harsh set of true speaking mountains I've found. And so there's a lot of very, you know, frazzled, we're at a nuclear hot pot here with the military too. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. And when I'm feeling that sense of frazzle out there and I see this guy and like, wow, you know, I was letting that frazzle kind of get on my nerves with what's that nature's right there. All I had to do was allow myself to get out of that loop and say, oh, 3113, I clearly need to take a breath here. That's really the discipline of many times a day, stopping and saying, I insist upon answering the call of, how do I feel in this particular way? How do I feel with what I'm doing? Most of us are just unconsciously choosing because we don't know any better, or we don't take the time. And I'm the dork who sets alarms. You know, I'll set an alarm until it becomes a habit, because it's important enough to me to be able to witness a deer. That deer hard stopped me with, oh yeah, you're making major changes, you know, and you're still going to be graceful and tasteful and possibly a little janky if you have to be. You got to put that left hook up. You know, might need to put it back just a little bit too. You don't see that deer in his whole life, but he defends himself as well. However, now's the time to allow that to happen, because it was really, I mean, it's frazzly, and it's also the middle of the Sirius Stargate going into the Lion's Gate. This is a Mercury retrograde year, the fire horse, and holy crap, you know, there's a lot going on. And so whenever I take all of that into consideration and see this guy and go, oh my gosh, you know, don't miss the significance of it, Kate, that sit here and study this for a moment. And that's so helpful, because I hadn't hit an impasse exactly with myself. It's just that a lot of stuff is changing, and I'm moving, you know, pretty quickly within the next month or so, and going into a completely drastically different type of lifestyle that gives me way more chance to travel and still do the stuff that I do with the Bureau of Prisons, you know, and it just gives me the freedom to continue to grieve the loss of everything that, you know, I've lost in this, and also simultaneously hold at the exact same time the ability, 33, thank you, the ability to know that we cannot be of service all the way out here without being willing to serve the situation in the way that it's asking. I didn't ask exactly for the situation to happen that took out all my pets, you know. That wasn't something that I was cooking up, you know, consciously aware of and going, hey, I can't wait until my life implodes again. However, the question to ask is, my life did implode, and how am I going to pick my face up off of this without 33 being a whole butthole? Because that just doesn't help. In the moments when I'm angry, in the moments when I need to have that, then containerize that, put some very, clear limits on it, and hold my tongue about getting too nasty in my mouth with, how much bombastic I want to get, because it's not that I'm creating something for someone else. I protect that within myself, that no, I need a moment to be a human. However, I never have been fond of wishing, another person ill or doing any of that, because I'm not here for that. Why you're a jerk and why you want to stalk another person or cause harassment or do whatever, that's a you thing. That's a you thing. And the less I analyze that or wonder that, I don't have any part of it. That's not my thing. I'm not a person that's willing to cause that kind of pain and havoc and weirdness for anybody else. I'm just not. And so it's not up to me to try to decide the psychology of another person. It's only for me to witness that, oh yeah, that's not my thing. And whenever I start feeling that stuff, oh, that's a swing by, that I don't own that. That's going to have to fly by. But to try to identify where it came from and all of that other stuff, that's trying to pick apart the frazzled radio frequency. That's trying to tune into some, minutia in the middle of all of that crap. And that's not a radio station. I don't want to listen to anything in here. And so if I rise above that and say, I don't want to hear any of the frazzle of the, the unseen, unheard, etc. out here world, because there's a lot flying around in the astral spaces. Those little freeways and byways of communication are full. I like to go this way with my communication, to have my column of awareness so that I can check out a deer and see that right in front of me, not be worried about what I think I hear, what I think I see, especially if I'm a high sensitive and empath, which a lot of people are really waking up to their gifts, and it's not a time to get stuck listening to all the bullshit. And where the veil used to be, there's just a lot of collapsing tower energy and a whole lot of collapsing stuff that Mercury retrograde is slamming stuff down. And if we know well enough that that's going to sound like Clown Town, it's going to be like a horror movie. I don't go to watch horror movies, then why would I listen to one? Why would I tune into one when I have Brother Deer right here saying, hey, I got something here for you? And a hawk visited over here not too long ago. When I start making that more important than the human endeavor, the natural world is a great way to help me tune back into me, and I can cope with, my own nervous system and how I can live outside of and a beautiful yellow butterfly going by, thank you, that I can live outside of that paradigm. And that's the whole key, is stop letting this paradigm get a hold of me. That the 3D Earth, that old one, it's already split apart. I mean, the timelines, in my opinion, go get your own opinion, is what I will tell people always, is how do you think it's going and how do you feel about this? And then we'll talk about that. But to have just, well, here's the answer. There isn't one. There's no person I listen to in my inspirational studies and any of the hard sciences. There's nothing, that I'm ever going to listen to where there's an opinion on it, that I will take that as solid fact, because one human having a thought, a feeling, and an opinion, etc., is one human, and it only takes a few to gather up a collective. And how do I know what is true unless I know how that sits in my body? Does that feel like crap in my body? Does that feel okay to me? If it feels okay to me, and I know that it truly is for me, then I can start digesting and building my own system of understanding, how I don't need to look up the deer symbolism that somebody else wrote very carefully. Look them up. They're the same from 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. And yet, if we ask the deer directly, without any fear of, well, that sounds crazy, okay, I just know what works for me, as I've contacted and been contacted, or made connection with. Contact sounds really weird to me. So made connection with, tuned into the minutia that's above all of this here, is a deer that, hey, do you talk? Can I speak with you? And those impressions start coming through, if we build that relationship. However, if we're watching the news or listening to the astral news, or, we're getting involved in trying to split our attention, we either need to spend a great deal of time on our own, doing our own thing and really honing our skill, or be out here. However, splitting our time between giving this reality a whole lot of time on deck with building itself as a freak show, it already is. There's no hope that most of this stuff is never going to look the same. I know for me, that's just never, that is not the reality. It is no longer available, and it's no longer harassing me. Finally, 3838, however, if I'd got caught up, if I'd gotten caught up in all of the appearance of stuff, no matter how weird stuff looks to me and, what I hear and see or what I hear, I can deny that law of assumption, that, and go above that and see, you can choose to have your reality. However, my reality is going to be sweeter. It's going to be kinder. And some people would say denial and dodo and all that other stuff. It's okay, because I don't care. I'm used to being called a dodo and a weirdo. I've been that my whole life, and I've always been on the outside looking in going, it's just that now I understand that no, this isn't a gaslighting, friend. This is you seeing what's in front of you and allowing people to do whatever they do, because it doesn't matter to me. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, and there's stuff falling down all over the place, and I can lean over and say, yeah, that's crazy, and then get right back up. If I choose to lie down and don't get back up, or only see from the floor, or only see from some position of superiority or something like that, I want to flex from all points and see, the perspective, and merely asking the question opens the door. And then be persistent about, why would I want more? It's because there's so much freedom. My life looks nothing at all like it used to, and I will never be hindered by the bullshit that was still trying to come through just as much as a few days ago, because people are mad, people are angry, people are sad, and it's okay. I have to pay the price for what I do, the same as everybody else. It's just that I'm going to be paying my price anyway. Then I'm going to make it work in a way that's of service for me to do the work that I came here to do, that's more important than babysitting anybody's feelings or anybody else's agenda or anybody's story or what they're doing. If they're not collaborating with me to work together with me to make this a better experience overall, to serve with me in healthy, functional, collaborative ways, then you've got other work you're doing here, or you don't. However, it's none of my business. And the more that I make, stuff that isn't my business, which is most everything, and really tune it out and just deny not denial, I deny that is my reality. I believe that it is yours, and it's not something that I have to make my reality just because I used to. That's history. And, there's no need to write the book. The book is already written, and we're rewriting into new earth. And we do not rewrite a new blueprint or overwrite the old blueprint by trying to wiggle and woggle and twaddle around on the old one while we dance around and kind of halfway. Make a bold step somewhere. Make a bold step at the level of bold step that can be made. And I promise you, it does go. It doesn't go, exponentially right away. We have to be able to drive our, Lamborghini. We can't be 12 learning how to drive, the fastest car available. And so being kind with ourselves and being gentle and being aware of our nervous system when that's, highly necessary, which for empaths and high sensitives and light workers, etc., it's going to be. For people that are all the way plugged out, they're not into it, then I'm not speaking to them, because what they're doing is not my business. I'm not going to know the entire world, so why would I try to serve the entire world? I'm meant to serve in my community in the way that I serve, that's best for me, to be as closely aligned as Jesus in my walks every day. My walks here, different aspects of me, and that integrates more in a healthy and productive and collaborative way when I can do that within me without asking for permission from outside, without feeling the shame and the guilt and all the bullshit, without getting caught up in spell work and everything else that's being thrown around, because everybody's given their last shot. The stuff that likes to use very dark practice, those people are really throwing out their last efforts, because the same movement of, Flat Stanley is kind of how I see that. Flat Stanley can look from one perspective, and as we continue to break away, that's going to continue to throw out the dark stuff and really give us its biggest case of ass, and really, want us to take those last ditch efforts. But when we really pull back and observe things, at least from my perspective anyway, I pull back and look at stuff and go, wow, that is I would almost say pathetic, like that's pretty much the same exact pattern. Sounds the same, looks the same, squeaks the same, and smells the same, absolutely smells the same. Then it doesn't matter if it's a familiar family member or familiar this from neighborhood or a familiar job. It's the same pattern that was breaking apart and exploding like all around me. That my job got janky with me all of a sudden, like told me that here's your paperwork for abandoning your job. I'd been in the hospital 2.5 weeks, like, oh no, this is the point that we let the job know that, nah, this is the ridiculosity that I have been waiting to release, because the part of me that knew that's going to need to just draw to a close when it does. But something happened. They pulled the trigger of some weird stuff a month or two ago that I, went, okay, that's really rude. And I was planning on leaving that anyway. And so you've done me a favor. However, being ahead of it well enough to not let that stuff bother me, that the ego part of it that was coming flying in with, that's yours, friend, whatever your paperwork is and all that stuff, it's not bothering me because I did my part and I have my receipts, and what you're doing, it's not my business. And yet a month and a half later, abandon your job. Like, well, that's convenient. And no. And by the way, do not ever reach out to me again. Just cash out my vacation pay and do not reach out to me again for any more of these emails and, trying to fix paperwork that is not my problem, period. Do not. And finally, respect, because 4444, respect has to be placed upon the situation when we finally put our foot down. However, until I could let the clown out of the closet there the entire way, there are things that were just going to happen, and none of that was going to be known to me as anything more than a mystery of listening to each little individual bullshit channel and, days of our jobs, days of our family, days of our lives over here. Nah, it's all and the greater theme is this and this and this. Then it doesn't matter if it leaks out at the grocery store with somebody doing something strange, or someone at the job, someone in here, someone in a contract that, okay, blew her mind and went, oh, okay, well, no, I don't think so. You're on your own with that. Bye-bye, and close, because my dip out point is based on some pretty severe cutoff criteria. It's right here. And that is after spending time doing exactly what I'm talking about and getting very, very, very adept in my mind with, I'll know that I can see this is setting itself up. I'm kind of a forward runner. I'm going to need to push through some stuff a little bit early to let people know what the field can be. I'm going to break out into the best version of this that we can be. And when you screw it up back there, my job, for instance, I'm setting this up for you to make the best decisions and the best choices. And yet looks to me like you're choosing something else. And I plan to be, out of this particular position by such and such time. And I guess there was some desire to do something. I have no idea. I don't track it. However, it pulled the trigger and I went, no, in fact, that is not it. And I could feel it hit the punch. I mean, I felt it because I am a high sensitive and I do feel things very deeply sometimes. That was the message for me at about 10 o'clock in the morning that I sent it. When it was received, oh, yep, and there's that nasty attitude. You reach out to me, personally. The boss of the entire place, never met her. It was a complete, just contract thing. Never met her. I could feel that woman just screech like a demon was in her, and she, a dark person with a lot of snitty little emails and a lot of snitty little text messages, certainly very personal, and never getting in the toilet with her, but I felt that one go, that leave me alone. You and I both know you've been a tool for the whole 2 years that I've worked here, and I don't want to hear it anymore. This is the last time you're going to reach out to me with this nonsense, and you're going to clear my record, get it right, and I expect my vacation pay, period. Should you run into any problem, you may reach out to me. Otherwise, I expect no problems, period. And when that hit, there's a person, I guess, that thought, oh, good, I can just treat this woman however I want to. And you can do what you need to, because I currently am an employee and that's working for me. However, I don't have to deal with you very often. If I had to deal with that every single day, hell no. So it just depends on how we're going to play. But no matter what, it doesn't matter if it's a job, a family member, a deer on the side of the road here, it's what am I willing to listen to? What am I willing to do? Am I willing to stand in the fear of somebody trying to intimidate me from, any position? Or am I willing to say, what do I have to lose here? I'm willing to step out into the boldest maneuvers that I have, because the boldest takedowns have been already had. Then when I pick my face up again and I can make my first bold move, it's going to be, hey, it's going to be this one. And so, though I did not plan what I planned for last month to happen, this month I'm leaving this apartment and I'm so relieved that finally it makes sense to me. Colorado Springs has become very difficult for me to be here. It's gotten very harsh. The military action is just, it's grown exponentially more difficult and less beautiful to me. And that's very much, a problem for me. I'm a connect with nature kind of girl. And so being able to travel and move with way more flexibility, that no, I don't have my companions anymore the way that I used to. However, I do carry them with me here. And I feel the presence of my entire team. And I feel, more importantly, the presence of me, that even if I thought that I'd lost everything moving through those liminal spaces, 48, I do. However, I always know that this is a matter of open my mouth and start, nope, I deny that there is a disconnection from myself. Fuck that. No, that I have connected to me always. And if I say one time that I am embodied in spirit, etc., with Christ or whatever it is that we believe in, if we say that one time, then we can say it again. It's a matter of overcoming the mind, because people are playing on our top all the time with our mind, and we're getting involved in it, and we're letting the fear just drive us into the ground. So it's mostly with using our mouth to deny that, no, I choose not to take that story. Even when I quiver, even when I shake and go, I don't really know I'm going to do this, it doesn't matter. I refuse to lie down and believe that at this point in my life, I'm this old and been through this much, to let that become my problem. And I start tracking back in my mind of where's the last success that we had? Where's the last time that there was something really good? Any measure necessary, except for violence, unless you need to make a very clear nope on that. I'm not laying hands on anybody. However, any means necessary to keep tracking in my mind, because this is a mind thing. This is me arguing with me about what I'm willing to believe about me. Me believing that I'm going to give up now. Nah, I still don't know how every detail is going to work. I don't care. I just know that I have evidence of things building for my success, and I can pay attention to that, watch the deer, and that makes it easier to deny what's over here clamoring very loudly, because what's clamoring around us sometimes is nothing more than the clanging, the banging, and the yanking and the banking of others that have made their decisions that they hate, and they want us to sit down, Kate, and let's have some really strange, well-timed, weird little conversation that it's only well-timed for the other party or the other side. Most of the time I find that getting these crazy little emails and text messages from my job, for instance, and from a contract that just blew up about a month ago, and wow, it was getting janky, it was getting really weird, and I didn't expect it to end that way. However, okay, because that's the flexibility necessary to let people just do whatever they do. And I don't ever rely on anybody else that's supposed to be collaborating with me. If I'm relying on them to come through as my sovereignty, I have made a mistake, and I've gotten my ass burned on that one a few times. However, this one, I don't know what you're doing. It makes no difference to me, because, I do my thing, and I don't get knocked off my square with what I do for my work. You want to get slidey and weird. I do not. My professional stuff is my professional stuff, and I do not compromise that. And so it was already showing me that, okay, it doesn't matter. And it blew up. I got thrown under the bus and went, okay, I see that. And there's a private exchange between that person and me of, this is how this is going to go. You can go ahead and have that little tour that you're taking there, but be careful what you're doing, with that other stuff. Wink, wink, and, just keep your shit tight. And so far, that, who knows? I don't follow up with people that would have been, could have been, or should have been in their mind that, no, you locked down somewhere. I did not. So anyway, I hope that's helpful to you in some way, and I hope that you can find your way very easily or kindly, at least for a few minutes. And it's a matter of just determined, stay clawed deep into determined, find a way to validate myself, not based on what anybody else is going to tell me, based on what I tell myself, that I'm alive and awake today. I'm breathing. Mother Nature gave me permission to be here, because I'd be turfed off this planet if I was no longer eligible to be here. Okay? Mother Nature gave me permission to be here, not anybody else. I'm here of my own sovereignty, if nothing else. With her, that I can breathe the air and I'm doing it, then I have the authority to walk boldly every step that I go forward with that authority alone. And it might be a creepy, crawly, tiny one. However, getting up off the floor to even begin walking, if we've been down for a minute, is going to be slow and tiny. It's a matter of take those tiny steps and make those really the celebratory steps without being bullshitting ourselves and without, stopping and going, well, sure, I sure did, this. We give ourselves the praise and we stretch just enough to be bold where we can honestly be bold. And that's it. So anyway, take care of yourself, as I said, and I'll see you again next time. Bye, friends.